So in this clip we see that Baleba receives possession, and just as I said in the previous analysis video, he allows the ball to roll across his body, receiving it with his back foot side on, cutting out any unnecessary touches. And this is something which is extremely important in this type of situation, where he's receiving the ball under pressure immediately on his first touch, both from the front and behind. His ball control is excellent straight away, but this is where we see the unique value of Baleba in comparison to nearly every other central midfielder in the league. As if this is Ugarte receiving the ball, best case scenario he gets his first touch right and finds a square pass into the central midfielder on his inside, retaining possession but not progressing the ball in behind the Ipswich midfield line, and worst case scenario he gets dispossessed, likely because he doesn't receive the ball on his back foot. But if this is Mainu or Bruno, maybe we see a square pass, or potentially they split the midfield line with a pass into the centre forward, which in this case would be Welbeck, and with Casemiro it really could be any of those three. But Baleba has the ability to produce pieces of play that you wouldn't even recognise as an option before it happens. But before I analyse the video footage, if you want to check out any cheap, good quality football jerseys, go over to jerseyfifa.co. They've got a variety of different current season and retro jerseys, including the new season Manchester United releases for the upcoming season. They sent me over the new home shirt with Bruno Fernandes on the back, as well as this white Manchester United away shirt from the 06-07 season with Ronaldo number 7 on the back, alongside this Zidane Juventus shirt from the 90s as well. You can use code ATLANTIS at checkout to get a 10% discount, so I'll leave a link in the description and in the comments section below. After receiving the ball on his back foot, you can see that he deliberately turns his body, shaping like he's going to play the forward pass into Welbeck, which has the effect of baiting Phillips in front of him to adjust his position, curving his run over to his right side, attempting to block Baleba's pass in that direction. This then in turn opens up the space on Phillips' left side, Baleba's right, allowing the Brighton man to drag the ball back across his body, bursting between the two Ipswich players, and now with this dribble he's progressed the ball in behind the Ipswich midfield line. But he's done so by retaining possession himself and exploiting the open space on the Brighton right hand side. So he's not even just progressing the ball in behind the midfield line, but doing it in the most optimal way. Now from this position, in hindsight he probably opts to play the through ball a bit too early. I think he'd be better off taking a few more touches, carrying the ball into that space, which would then create a 3v2 overload on Brighton's right side, with the Ipswich left-sided centre-back and left-back now in a positional dilemma, as they can either retreat, tracking the runs of Jorginho Rutter and Minte in behind, but in turn allowing Baleba to carry the ball into the final third, or one of them could look to leave their man, step out and engage Baleba, which could then allow Baleba to release a free man in behind the back line as well. The idea for the through ball in this position isn't exactly the wrong decision, it's just the execution, as Baleba doesn't quite set the pass out far enough away from Leif Davis, allowing the left back to make the interception. However, from here we see Baleba's unique value out of possession. Davis is going to play a pass into the centre, which with most players other than Baleba would be a vulnerable situation for Brighton, with Baleba their central midfielder completely out of position on that right side and Liam Delap and Phillips about 10 yards ahead of him, having been previously taken out of the game by his dribble. However, this is where Baleba's reactions and acceleration across short distances would be hugely valuable to Amorim's side, and a complete game changer both in the counter press but also after a turnover in recovery situations like this. If this is one of Ugarte, Bruno, Mainu and especially Casemiro, giving the ball away in Baleba's position, as soon as Leif Davis plays that pass they're completely out of the game, but not Baleba, as despite being 10 yards deeper and having to change direction on Phillips' first touch from Davis' pass, in the blink of an eye Baleba has eaten up those 10 yards and is now within about 2 yards of Phillips when he plays that first time pass into Liam Delap, which then leads to Phillips under-hitting his pass, and when Delap is about to receive the ball, Baleba is already there, almost managing to nick possession, and now because of Baleba's reaction, turning speed and acceleration across short distances, Brighton have gone from a vulnerable situation where Ayari, the other central midfielder alongside Baleba, would have been left isolated in a 2v1 against Delap and Phillips in a massive amount of space, with the Brighton defensive line also pushed high up the pitch, to instead Brighton now having their midfield double pivot behind the ball, with Baleba then going on to make a well-timed standing tackle in order to dispossess Delap and win possession. And we can see yet another example from the same game against Ipswich where he was absolutely incredible. For some reason at the start of this clip he's laid out back on the ground like he's sunbathing, as Jorginho Rutter attempts a first-time flick and Morsey makes the interception. Once again, you can see that Brighton are in a vulnerable situation, with their front five caught ahead of the ball, the right back Veltman on the far side high just out of picture, and Duncan Hinchelwood, the left back, also high on this left hand side, with Ipswich having all of their front three in this open space in the centre to receive the ball. Even at this point, Baleba is still on the floor, and even though Sam Morsey isn't the quickest carrier of the ball, look how quickly Baleba goes from on the ground to right up alongside him, able to use his physicality to completely change his direction and force Morsey over to the left side. But rather than doing what a lot of central midfielders would do in this situation, which is to leave Morsey and simply retreat back into their central midfield position, once again we're able to see the unique ball-winning value of Baleba as he continues to apply the pressure, and you can see just how rapid he is over shorter distances as Morsey takes a touch that isn't particularly heavy, but Baleba moves like he's on ×2 speed, eats up the yards and actually gets to the ball before Morsey can take his second touch, this possessing him before he can even reach the centre circle. And now yet again, Brighton have gone from a vulnerable position where their midfield was completely open and the high back line would have been exploited, but for having Baleba in central midfield. Now later on against Ipswich, Baleba receives the ball on his back foot, doesn't simply just move the ball on to retain possession, but instead is able to take advantage of the deep Ipswich midfield line, driving the ball into the space. Now his pass is rather rushed, which is an aspect of his game that does need to improve, as like in the first example, his decision making can be a bit hit or miss sometimes, seemingly not yet having the ability in his game to think as quickly as he moves, but once again he manages to win the loose ball that isn't even really a 50-50, but more like a 20-80 in the opposition player's favour, moving double the speed of Phillips to get to the ball, and now once again Brighton have avoided being counter-attacked on and now have won the ball back in the opposition's defensive third. Now in this next example, Brighton are being countered on, a similarly vulnerable situation to the previous two, backline high 5 yards ahead of the halfway line, with the left back on this near side about 10 yards behind the opposition's right winger, and a big open space in the centre. But once again, the acceleration of Baleba across shorter distances, specifically on a recovery, is what bails Brighton out of these situations, where without him at the very least the opposition are going to be able to break into their half, potentially their defensive third, and at worst create a high value chance or score. But Baleba eats up the ground, and then with zero hesitation, puts in a perfectly timed sliding tackle before the opposition player can even start running with the ball. But these next two clips against Chelsea are where we can see Baleba's anticipation, acceleration and complete lack of hesitation actually be used as an offensive weapon in the counter-press, which is the one area where Agate is elite and a specialist in, which is why I think if Baleba is signed, then you do probably have to move on Agate, either to fund the Baleba move or to bring in a left wing back, because Baleba is just as good, if not better at Agate's specialist ball winning trait, but offers far more in pretty much every other area. Matoma has the ball on the left, slides in a Stupinan on the underlap, and you can see Baleba is about 10 yards from the box. When Caicedo makes the interception, he's on the edge of the box, with Matoma a lot closer to the ball. But like Agate and unlike Casemiro or Mainu, Baleba senses the opportunity to win the ball back high up the pitch, and so rather than standing statically or retreating, which would usually be common practice, given that Chelsea could look to counter from this position. But Baleba instead continues to move closer to the ball, and even here as Caicedo is about to play the pass back to Colwill, Baleba is a few yards behind the penalty spot, and about 5 yards behind Matoma, Caicedo and the ball. However, by the time Colwill was about to make the first time clearance, Baleba has eaten up the yards and now is level with Caicedo and Matoma within a few yards of Colwill, enabling him to make the block from the clearance, which leads to Rutter scoring from an aerial duel and Sanchez physically assaulting him with a punch to the face. But later on in that exact same game, this time rather than a counter press from a turnover, this time Brighton are pressing high from Chelsea's build-up, with Baleba about 5 yards from Caicedo, even when the ball goes back to Robert Sanchez and he's about to play the pass into Caicedo. However, as it's pretty obvious by now, 5 yards to Baleba might as well be seen as like 1 yard to a regular central midfielder, as he bursts across the ground, gets to the ball before Caicedo, making the interception on the edge of the box, with Sanchez actually almost off the pitch when he gets to the ball, before showing that he's not simply just a ball winner, by finishing from a pressurised one-on-one, finishing with composure and technique, as Robert Sanchez is racing out at him. And this is why Baleba is valued at over £80 million, despite being a central midfielder. I showed his press resistance and ball carrying in the first video, but his speed across the ground, anticipation, tackling ability, and physicality combines to make him a ball-winning machine, able to completely bail his side out when they're caught high up the pitch after a turnover, racing over and breaking up attacks, which throughout the course of a match is significantly going to reduce the XG that United concede, let alone over the course of a season, genuinely maybe leading to United conceding 10 or more less goals throughout the course of the season, which is a significant amount of points. But also from offensive situations either during the counter press or after a turnover or just when pressing high from the opposition's build-up, Baleba essentially becomes an offensive weapon because of his ability to win the ball back high up the pitch, which in pressing theory is incredibly valuable because straight after a turnover, the opposition are stretched in their possession shape, not being able to get back tight and compact in their regular defensive shape, and of course you're also close to the opposition's goal, and so in general this is going to lead to higher value chances than if you had to break down the opposition from settled possession. So let me know what you thought of this analysis in the comment section below, and if you want to check out any cheap, good quality football jerseys, go over to jerseyfifa.co. You can use code Atlantis at checkout to get a 10% discount. I'll leave a link in the description and in the comment section below.